I've got one recommendation for you right off the bat, and that is for you to study the history of university presses, because I think what you'll find is that some university presses, particularly University of California Press, an outstanding example, they started out as a service agency for their own university. So what you're describing here is recreating the history of early university presses as service agencies to their university. There's a wonderful memoir by Auguste Fouget, former director of University of California Press, that covers some of that history. But I would also remind you that there's a very interesting section of Kathleen Fitzpatrick's book, which talks about thinking about urging university presses to go back to that model. So there's some very interesting, synergies and discussions here about what the future of university presses are going to be and what you're talking about the role of libraries should be. But there's another alternative, and that is the effort in which I've involved as a member of the search committee for the new director of Amherst College Press, because as you know, that press is being created as a regular university press from within a library. Now, why that's important is because there's a reason that university presses evolve from being service agencies for the universities to regular publishing businesses. And you need to understand the business reasons for that evolution that made it important for university presses to evolve in that direction. Because unless you understand history, you're going to be doing things perhaps in ways that would be counterproductive and inefficient. So the alternative model here is for libraries to set up their own university presses. So, that's going to be a very interesting experiment. And one of the ironies we're already thinking about and talking about Amherst, which is going to be fully open access publishing monographs, is that you have to have an e-commerce aspect of that in order for the whole discoverability mechanism to work well. So print on demand is going to be important there, because then Amazon can be used as a discovery tool for what Amherst is going to be publishing. So, there's some very interesting questions about these things going on. I'd be interested in any comments you have to make on that.
No, you are absolutely right, Sandy. And, don't get us wrong. We don't think we're the first ones to approach this, and, nor are, we have university press directors like Ron involved in the effort. So we have to learn from the past. We have to learn from the best examples and what we're going to try to do to go forward. This is really a mechanism to begin dialogue with groups such as we have folks here, Anvil, Elementa, all these different initiatives in the country, and the successful models that we can identify, and really, if anything, to do exactly that, to learn from that experience and learn from those best practices and to share that so we don't duplicate efforts.
Yeah, I would just echo the focus on kind of what I would call mission alignment between library publishing services and the university, the host university itself. And you mentioned this as kind of the university press and as service agency within the university. I think my study participants talked about that a lot and actually warned against, kind of scope creep, publishing too much or publishing things that may not be of great concern as a field to that particular university. So people felt that was a way to go. As a library, most of us report to the provost, who is the chief academic officer, and that was a point of concern, making sure the provost felt like the fields we were serving were of major repute and of concern to that particular university.
There are many members of the LPC in the audience, so if this isn't, I think many of these questions shouldn't be answered just by us, but by other members of the coalition as you have thoughts. So I invite anybody to comment on any of the questions that get raised.
Hi, Sorel at SUNY Geneseo, and I wanted to say that we're involved in a lot of publishing activities, reprints, open access journals, new works. But the new works that I think are really important for libraries as publisher to consider seriously is open textbooks. And that answers a larger problem, both with the transformation of higher education ahead, but as well lowering the cost of our access to higher education. So I think that's a real critical role that we could provide, not just looking at what faculty pain points are with current scholarship. It's what are the pain points of our students in the learning environment.
Ditto.
Are there any other questions? I'm curious from the panel, if with all of these ideas you have about these changes, for example, hiring publishers to assist, projection on China in terms of what will be in that realm, your list of services that you see to be changing, is there any sector that's looking at job creation along those lines and changes in job titles and what those responsibilities might look like? Especially using that service list as a driver.
One of the conversations we had in the meeting yesterday was about new curricula needed for the kinds of positions that are getting created in our institutions for these new roles. And, you know, I'm sorry, I don't know your name. I don't remember your name. You were bringing up in the meeting that the kinds of things that you're engaging with now in your position, you weren't taught in library school. You picked it up along the way, either in other training. And anyway, to answer your question, I think yes, to figure out both the curricula needed and the kinds of roles and responsibilities in these new jobs is a really important part of this.
Yeah, I didn't present on it today, but in my article there, I addressed that. I asked questions about roles and skills and where all that's headed. So there's a fairly sizable section in the article about that, and that's very much on people's minds in terms of where this is gonna, where this is gonna go. A lot of libraries are trying to leverage kind of their digital curation and repository work with this as well, digitization, et cetera, just from a technology workflow standpoint, I think, trying to figure out how to meld these things together. So I think there's great interest in trying to, integrate library publishing services with other things that we've begun to build in libraries, but time will tell how that works out.
Is Katie Rowson here somewhere? Well, there's Katie in the back. So Katie is, I would say, an example of these. I mean, Katie is sort of both a scholar and working in conjunction with the library at Emory. And, a lot of this is, though, pulling yourself up by your bootstraps and figuring it out as you go along. Is that fair to say, Katie? There are not yet solidified titles, that have emerged in these things. I mean, that's part of it right now. And you're right, it is sort of a chicken and an egg situation. We may lose this opportunity, but the problem isn't going away either. So it's just time to start getting some traction on it.
This is Mike Furlow from Penn State, and Penn State's a member of the LPC, and we were glad to see it emerge and signed up for it right away, or as quickly as we could, given how fast things move in universities. But I wanted to just kind of throw out an observation, and this kind of kicks us out of the realm of library publishing specifically. It's more about libraries and our commitments across the profession to these emerging interstitial organizations that are popping up to address really specific or needs in the community that aren't being well addressed by specific long-term organizations. So Penn State's a member of ARL, ALA, CLEAR. Those are kind of hardwired in. We're also members of Hathi Trust. We're members of LOCKSS. We're members of Meta Archive. We're signing up for a initial year of archive space. We're DuraSpace members as well, and I got to tell you that I'm kind of afraid to walk in my boss's office anymore and say, "Hey, guess what? There is another professional, library type organization popping up that we need to be involved with." And I'm not saying this to be critical so much as I'm saying it's something that we're going to have to start paying attention to, and I think LPC has to pay attention to, and make sure that what it does really offers real value. Because it's getting competitive in this space, and the fees aren't high necessarily. They're really pocket change in some libraries, not all by any means, and I think that's going to be an issue for leadership, though, to figure out where it really invests. So.
Yeah, it's an excellent point, and I think about that a lot myself. I mean, as a dean who writes the checks for these things, I think about this a lot. And so I think part of it is cost, though. I mean, I think, we have a responsibility as we, identify these kinds of initiatives to keep the costs low, You know, there are other circles where these things are being talked about, and the number $20,000 comes up an awful lot. And those people just talk about, oh, we just kind of. I've heard one speaker say literally, well, we just kind of pulled that out of the air. We thought $20,000 a pop would be really handy. That doesn't float with me. It doesn't float with my provost. You know, that's really difficult to swallow that. So I think, I know with the LPC, we looked initially at, costs. What are we trying to gather? What are we trying to support that really costs us, cold hard cash to do that? So, I mean, the point's well taken, and we'll do the best we can. I also think that, within some of these groups, there's underlying technologies, and this again gets us off of publishing services a bit, but we see, this movement where there's an awful lot of open technologies being developed, and then it's okay, great, where does this go? Who manages it? We have one of these at Virginia Tech we call LibX, which is kind of an web localizer for searching catalogs, and it's used by hundreds, if not 1,000+ libraries. How are we going to maintain this and keep this up? And we've had all sorts of suggestions. It's like, do we need yet another foundation or party like a DuraSpace to manage another piece of technology? I mean, I think we as libraries are looking at, we kind of need one place to kind of, push all these technologies to and say, here, be the steward and try to figure out some very cost-effective ways to doing it. Because with all these groups, we're already beginning to see, this mounting amount of overhead with these organizations that are popping up. So it's an excellent point, and I think at least on the technology sphere, there's things we can do going forward to kind of keep those overhead costs simple.
Another way to look at it is, the pattern that Tyler was seeing, and that, I mean, we're all just familiar with, of differentiation of services and opportunities and possibilities are such that, we're all well aware as librarians that our modest-sized institutions cannot do all these new things. We have to figure out ways I'm echoing the points you made, Tyler, that we've got to figure out ways. We have this, not only the practical realization, but just the instinct that we should band together for mutual benefit and do things as groups that we can't do individually. Well, what does that concretely, translate into? Well, it means new organizations, new services, new things that are differentiating and popping up like flowers as we start to, reap the benefits of 20 years of pilot projects to understand what this stuff looks like. Well, okay, now if we're going to be serious about it, we've got to actually do it. We've got to actually pay for it. We do need to be strategic about what we invest in, which arrays of these services we're going to incorporate into our organizations, what groupings we're going to be parts of. But I think of it as sort of a natural evolution of the information community, the sort of differentiation from, we're all farmers and we all do the same thing, and now we have, differentiated groupings of institutions and meta groupings of organizations that are doing, new tasks that we weren't able to do in the past. And how are we going to carry all that on top of all the prior burden? That is the big question, and figuring out how we're going to achieve any kind of sustainability, the buzzword of the day, is squarely the issue that's in front of us. But we've got to change some of the underlying dynamics, I think. And, my metaphor for this is reintegrating the scholarly communication cycle. How much are we over time, Sharon?
Well, can I really quickly interject on top of that? There are two things that I'll say, and my staff will laugh because I had a slide in our kind of staff retreat materials early this week that was originally supposed to be part of my presentation yesterday, and I steered clear of doing it in the end. But I had listed out all of the organizations that I could think of that were collaboratives in the broad fields that we play in, so in preservation and in scholarly communications. And let me tell you, I mean, Mike, you're right on target. I can't imagine the pressure that one would feel going to one's dean or one's provost and asking for funding for yet another of these membership organizations. And we took this very seriously when we were bringing up LPC. Now, Meta Archive, there's a service aspect that drove everything that we were doing there. So the membership in the community is immensely important, and it's something that we continue to watch and make sure is part of the value add. But there's a service underlying it as well, and a service that's embedded back at the institution. So we killed two birds with one stone, so to speak, in that model that I really like, and that I'd love to see others doing similar things. With LPC, we brought this up as a project in part because we weren't sure we needed an organization. I certainly was not going to stick my neck out and say that we needed an organization. And one of the things that I expected we would need to wrestle with for the first 3 or 4 months was whether or not that was indeed something that we needed. And Sarah and I hosted a number of conversations about this, both with the full committees and then also in the background with certain individuals within the community, and heard resoundingly from almost everyone, that this was an organization that they felt strongly needed to be created. But we're still wrestling with issues of governance and, is there a funding stream for this? Do we need a core staff member going forward? If so, for how long? The other thing that I want to say is, something that I hope will become more, I think new organizations that come up in this particular moment are going to have to pay more attention to what we're trying to do in embedding the skill sets back at the local institutions. To my mind, if LPC starts taking on too much ownership at any given moment, it's a failure point, and it's also a disservice to the libraries that we're trying to serve. You guys need to build your skills. You guys need to build your infrastructure. You guys need to build your connections to each other. That may be mediated by a group like Educopia or like LPC, but ultimately, LPC should be able to be run by the members if Educopia disappears. It shouldn't need a host in the long term. So I really appreciate the comment, and this was, at one point, this is what I was going to talk about yesterday, and I steered clear of it, and it's nice to have a chance to go over time and hold all of you guys up so that you can hear my thoughts on it in the end anyway.
All right, please join me in thanking our speakers.